Welcome, everybody. This is Denny with Wise is True, and today I've got a very special guest, Reed Summers, who's the son of Marshall Vian Summers, who for 30 years has been in contact with the creator of all that is, and also a race of allies for humanity who have made their presence known to Marshall, but otherwise unknown to the rest of the world. And Reed is coming forth as the face for the two portals of information coming from this material, alliesofhumanity.org and newmessage.org. And so, Reed, thank you so much for joining me. I've been looking forward to this interview ever since I asked. So I really appreciate you doing this. It's a big deal.
Yeah, happy to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
So I invite people to go look at those websites, get an introduction to it. But what I'd like to do with Reed here today is let him talk about his personal story and coming out, so to speak, as the spokesperson for this material now.
Sure. Well, I'll start by giving your viewers a little bit of orientation to who Marshall Vian Summers is, who is the source of this information. Over 30 years ago, my father was a teacher for the blind in the California Bay Area, and he, through his work, began to cultivate this mysterious path of following an inner voice in his work with others with major disabilities. And this grew and grew for him, this voice experience, telling him how to work with people who had very specific, and unique needs. And it grew into an inner guidance training, and it grew beyond that into a revelation. And Marshall was taking retreat in the deserts of the American Southwest, feeling that he had to pull away from all his commitments in both career and his physical location and relationships, and take retreat and find out what this voice was and what it really had to say to him. And it was there that this voice came upon him and commanded him to record a series of messages for the world that relate to the great environmental change underway on the planet Earth right now, and our destined contact with intelligent life from beyond the world, and what this would mean and what this would change for humanity. So that really was the moment of inception for a multi-decade journey that he would take, and later with my mother, and then later with myself, receiving thousands of pages of direct transmission from an angelic source regarding the planetary threshold upon which we stand at this time now, and the preparation for our emergence into a universe of intelligent life. So that's the context that I was born into, as a baby back in 1984. And I grew up seeing my father enveloped in this process, both of revelation and this process of bringing forth a critical message for the world, a message that the world didn't want to hear, perhaps way before its time. And seeing both that tremendous gift and remarkable mystery that surrounded him, and also the great effort to reach humanity so that people of conscience everywhere could be reached and awoken, and could then come in contact with their own source of inner guidance and follow that to the fruition and the fulfillment of their own contribution to serve the world. So that was the context that I grew up in, and trying to be a normal kid and have a normal life within extraordinary circumstances. And yet I think the demonstration of my parents, their commitment to this mission, really, because it is a mission to reach the world, their devotion to each other, the remarkable relationships that came into being around them through this purposeful work, made a huge impact on me. And it accelerated my life. It really supercharged my life.
Are you an only child?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no siblings. Yeah. And, I left home at the age of 18 and went to live abroad in the Middle East right after 9/11, a year after 9/11. And that really began my journey around the world, and brought me into contact with remarkable people, very not like myself, and gave me a firsthand experience of the scope of struggle facing this human family, the great environmental crises that are now blooming into really a global phenomenon, and the gift of revelation that my father had received in service to that, to both people and planet. And so here I was out there in the Middle East teaching English, going to college, traveling all over, as a solo 19-year-old young man, tall, blonde, buzz-cut American, walking the streets of Aleppo and Damascus and Istanbul and Cairo. And I think that's really where the reality of the world and the people of this world and the new message from God that my father had received came together and became a coherent picture that I knew had to do with me. And so it was soon after that I knew I had to come home and help Marshall Vian Summers bring this message to the world. I mean, if this is a new message from God, a divine communication for every person, be they of any religion or no religion, it's not judgmental, it's not critical, it is an activation and an encouragement and an empowerment for each person to find the living presence of knowledge within them. That's what it is. Seeing that and seeing the need in the world brought me, lit up my circuitry, frankly. And I knew that I needed to come back and help Marshall bring this to world awareness. And that's precisely why I'm with you today, because it is my part to play. It's my part to help bring this multi-thousand-page communication, calling, preparation, pathway of steps to people who, for their whole life, have known that there was something about them that was different, that there's something about this time in the world that was unique and special and would be highly important to the greater evolutionary track of the human race. And that they're here now. They're in the world now. And there's very little in the world that confirms this time and what they know about this time and what they know about themselves. And so I feel it's my part to play to help speak to those people and tell them, the story of Marshall, the story that I've lived, and bring to them this message, pure and simple.
So what's been the biggest challenge for you since you come back and decided to start doing these interviews?
Yeah, well, I think, we've reached a lot of people and yet too few have responded. I think that would be one of the biggest challenges is the intention to receive this message or to even just receive, what it says and what it advocates for, and to take the steps of preparation. Too few have responded with an intention to do those things. And perhaps we just need to speak to more people, which is actually my sense, because there are millions of people who this day, tonight, this morning, wherever they are in the world, they know there is something they need to find. There are people they need to find, perhaps a place they need to get to, and there is a purpose for them that relates to the context of the world and even what exists beyond the world. Millions of these people, and they need to be reached and given something that they can either, respond to or pass on. And it's really up to them. It's their own decision. But I think the challenge of reaching people with a difficult message, a message of tremendous opportunity and possibility, but one that requires real work and real change, in our own personal lives to move us into position so that we can play a part in this greater coordination that's underway to steer humanity off the cliff's edge, and into the true direction that its real and promising evolution lies. That's been a difficult challenge.
Yeah. So, what was the issue surrounding you coming forth to do the interviews instead of your dad?
Well, Marshall, is really involved in some historic projects. First and foremost is bringing forward the entirety of the new message from God, which exists in over 50 books, and compiling it into a series of volumes and releasing it to the world in a short period of time. Okay. So he's immersed in that project. He does do interviews from time to time, but the multitude of opportunities to speak to people, he just isn't in a position to accept every offer that comes his way.
Yeah.
But if there is a group of people, an audience, individuals who are truly open to hearing the difficult but honest truth about the state of our world and what it will take for us, people of conscience, forerunners of our race, to respond to that, I think Marshall would welcome that opportunity.
Right.
But he's done many interviews. He's spoken at many events, and he's been met with a fair amount of hostility and disregard.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing he needs at this stage.
Yeah.
So
It reminds me of back in the old days when they started doing the UFO conferences, and there was Barbara Bertalik, Dr. Carla Turner, and there could have been a couple others, but they would be disinvited to these UFO conferences because they would say, well, all those women want to do is talk about lizards. And what it was basically, they didn't have any beautiful contact stories to share with people about, our friendly alien neighbors out there. They were talking about abductions and, sexual manipulations and, night terrors and things that were happening to people's children. And so they wouldn't be included in these conferences because it was a fairly dark, foreboding message,
Yeah.
And
well, so Marshall has brought forward 4 questions. This is what his message is about contact. The 4 questions are these: what is happening? Why is it happening? What does it mean? And what must we do? And his invitations to speak have all been about the phenomenon. What is happening? People love this. They're addicted to it. They want to keep it a mystery, full of possibility, and to project onto it all their needs and hopes for a greater life, a utopian vision, a spiritual awakening on earth, when really this is reality. This is nature. This is not preference. We're not creating this reality out of our own desires and intentions. This is reality coming at us. We are the native peoples of a new world. Visitation and contact is underway. What is it? What does it mean? Why is it happening? And what must we do? And as Marshall tried over the years to go into the why is it happening, meaning why are they here? What does it mean, meaning implications for the race? And what must we do? Action, awareness, education. The uptake was just not there.
Yeah.
And people were just enamored with the phenomenon and the multitude of possibilities, many of them quite dubious, quite preferential, that really didn't reflect reality itself. And
right.
So there are a few out there in the research realm of this phenomenon who are trying to educate about reality, the real phenomenon, and yet even they don't quite have the perspective to take it to the why is it happening, what does it mean?
But I'm very encouraged to include them. Like I've done that with my interviews and stuff. And one of the ones that I just had, I was so happy to do was with Dr. David Jacobs, who wrote "They Are Among Us," or "Walking Among Us" is a book he wrote. He's been studying this for 30 years.
Oh, well, we have enormous respect for David and the work he's.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh yeah.
And
and
he's going through some stuff, so he wasn't giving interviews. For some reason, he decided to give me an interview, and I thought, well, this is great. But he was kind of like from that same genre of researchers where, the message, was like problematic, like what you just talked about,
Right.
But me personally, I mean, like if you're getting a good portion of it correct, then but by all means, let's include because it fleshes it out. You really don't know what's going to be the door for somebody. Like somebody could look at David's work and go, oh my gosh,
Right.
and then they'd be open to what your dad has discovered,
Absolutely.
So it's a tortuous path, but there's many paths out there that can lead to what Marshall's provided for us. And so I'm just, like I said before we started recording, I'm so happy to have found this work, especially with such a time span and legacy and quantity and quality of material behind it. Because it's going to help a lot of people navigate. Because it's the map. I use the map analogy. We all kind of know where we want to go, but unless we know where we are, we have no means of getting there. If you're using a map and you don't know where you're on the map, good luck getting to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, one of you asked before our conversation today, is there anything you or Marshall want people to know? One thing I was talking to Marshall about only a week or two ago is the following. Regarding contact, why can't people simply see and know this for what it is? After decades and decades of research into the phenomenon and a mounting body of evidence that there is something that is covert, that is quite negative and detrimental to our health and safety, and that is collaborating in ways with humanity that are very divisive. Why can't people see and know that for what it is? Simple truth. And that's one call that Marshall, feels he needs to put out there is, after all these years, can we simply acknowledge that contact is underway, that it is an intervention into our world for the purpose of really gaining access to the earth, its resources, and its people?
Yeah. One thing that's helped me read really,
Yeah.
like discover that, that aspect is studying mind control.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I study mind control, the more I can understand how this works,
Yeah.
how people can be exposed to so much evidence and still be in denial about what it means.
Yeah.
And mind control is a big part of the alien intervention. I mean, they've probably put more of their own resources into that aspect of what's going on here than just about anything else you could think of. And then, of course, the mind control is like an octopus. It extends in all these different areas of our life. Through the food, the water, electromagnetic interferences, the cell phone towers. Television was the first one where they really got the hooks in and started on the populations three generations ago. And I posted somewhere, it's like, if you want to know about ETs, UFOs, and ascension, study mind control first, because you'll save a lot of time. It really does help a person separate the wheat from the chaff. And you can see why the intervention has been so powerful and so pervasive and so successful up to this point, because mind control has been such a huge feature of their operations, so to speak.
Well,
they know how to manipulate humans.
Yeah. Well, this is a very important point, and there's a large amount of text in the new message dedicated to the reality of what it calls the mental environment.
Right.
Which is really the parallel reality next to the physical, but one in which we have gained almost no skill and ability, no objectivity. And one of the gifts of the new message is to prepare us to live, as we already are, but to live successfully within a mental environment, where now there are other forms of intelligent life present in our mental environment. And that of its own can produce an influence and a disturbance, let alone if they have their own agenda or intentions to use the mental environment. And this is a small kind of brick in the wall, a small component of this huge picture that the new message has provided about life beyond our world. The reality of trade and travel, the reality of how civilizations rise and fall, the local environment of space into which we're emerging, which is a highly populated one, and the value of this planet that we live on. The perspective to understand our place in this cosmos, but also the ground underneath our feet. We are very akin to the natives of Colombia, standing on top of land with vast oil reserves, which didn't matter much to them, but mattered to others, or would come to matter to others. And what a gift for those natives to be able to step back from the local context that they're absorbed into and see their part in the earth and the other forces at work on that earth, and the destiny that they would encounter should they not unite themselves and protect what they have and become educated and aware about the greater panorama of life beyond them. This is precisely what's facing us as a world. We are a world of divided tribes and nations. We don't have a lot of strength in the mental environment, and we are coming into contact with an advanced frontier of life that is interested in what we have. The biological abundance of this planet, even the spiritual capabilities and power of the human family, which are not nothing in a universe of barren worlds where freedom is rare. So this reality of mind control is a part of the picture. And yet, to understand the part it plays, I think it's critical to step back and look at the reality of life in the universe and come to understand our position in that universe of life.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about solutions, where do you go? What do you talk about?
Well, the solution is the major message that Marshall has. Frankly, others are uncovering the phenomenon, which I think is sufficient to help us know what is happening. Finally, can we know that there is an intervention underway?
Right.
Can we understand that our world is emerging now into a larger panorama a playing field that we know nothing about, that we are divided and are undermining our self-sufficiency in the world, doing things that are undermining our future as a race? Can we understand that? And then can we say, oh my God, this has everything to do with why I'm here and the contribution I want to make. What must I do in light of these two major realities? And so the solution that Marshall brings forward is what the new message calls the way of knowledge. And more specifically is presented in the book Steps to Knowledge, which is a book of daily practices to bring the thinking mind into alignment and contact with the deeper mind within us. Now, this is, you could say, our true self or our spiritual reality or the self we were before and beyond this life, the soul that is journeying through many lives. However you want to describe it, this is the deeper aspect of self that we all carry. This aspect of self cannot be manipulated by a worldly power. It is not susceptible to the mental environment. It is not susceptible to the human tendencies towards ambition and conflict and all of these things that are a part of our human side. And we need this knowledge to guide us and protect us and show us where to go, who to know, and what to do. And Marshall, if anything for folks, is a demonstration of a life lived close to that beating heart of knowledge within us. That voice guided him into the desert. That voice spoke to him in the desert. That voice brought him into contact with my mother, Patricia, and created a marriage of tremendous power and, something that has been a wellspring for thousands of people, given so much to people who have become students of the new message. So Marshall has lived a life of knowledge, and that's really what he's calling for us all to do. We can, at the level of the mind, become enamored with the phenomenon, with the dates and the names and the races and where they're from and what they want, and all the competition we think is there. This is all the mind. The truth is, there is a simple truth about this, of who is here and what it means. And this knowledge that we all carry is what will reveal that to us and tell us where to go, when to turn left and when to turn right, so that we can get to where we need to go. Because I think, many people feel this tectonic shift happening underneath their feet. They know something big is moving, and it is unseen, it is unreported, it is unacknowledged by culture at large, but they feel it. It is actually exerting its effect upon them at the level of knowledge. But if you're not connected to that place within you, and if you're just acting and reacting to the world events of today and tomorrow and next week, you won't be able to move with that tectonic shift as you're meant to. So I think millions, maybe tens of millions of people or more are feeling the effect of change in this world at the level of knowledge. And how powerful if they could quiet the mind, come in contact with that deeper mind, take the steps to knowledge, steps back into contact with their true self, and be moved to do whatever their nature and design has set out for them, whether it be to help the poor or to address religious violence in the world or to help the problem of the loss of arable land and fresh water in the world, whatever it be. We all carry this gift, this contribution to make. And the new message from God is a message specifically to activate that in the awareness of millions of people, which I believe is precisely what the world needs, even beyond solutions and new technologies and political coalitions.
Right. It goes back to the individual, and they find their own part in being the solution, and they're going to be uniquely placed to have an influence in whatever their arena that they've been placed in, just by making that own personal change, like we were talking about before. There's a lot of people who know that they have to do something. They kind of know what it is, but there's a lot of fear around it because they have family concerns or professional concerns. They don't want to be vocal or public, or they don't want to upset their families. There's a whole laundry list of excuses. And I think that's one of the reasons I think this interview is so important, because here we have another example of somebody who's intimately involved, decided to go public on behalf of this message. And so, we can all do that in our own way. And So the other thing I want to ask is like, have you guys discussed the whole notion of tipping point or going viral or the 100th monkey, those kinds of phenomenons? So like, because you did also state it's kind of a numbers game. It's one of the frustrations that you've had as you're getting the word out. Seems to be few people responding, but like we've seen in a lot of things, you get to this like kind of like funny little number, and then things just go viral. You can't even, you just have to run to get out of the way. Do you envision this being a situation like that maybe as well?
I'm open to what comes. I can't say I'm driving for viralness or something like that, but I mean, the truth is, absolutely, does a new message from God need to reach millions of people? Certainly it does. And I talked in that interview a few weeks ago with Ian Lee about the switch within all of us.
Right.
And many, many people have this buildup of energy and understanding and knowledge, knowing the truth. And it's building, and it's like a tectonic force within them. And at some point, those plates are going to go. I mean, something's happened in the life of a person, and I don't know what will trigger it. If it's something Marshall might say, which has certainly happened for many, if it's something that happens in the world, if it's a need that has their name on it, that they see underway out there, and I have got to respond to this. This is now the knowledge switch within people, and I think there are millions of people who have a lot of tension built up on that switch, and I can't tell you why it's not going to the right, why it's not clicking over, but it sure needs to, and yet when it does, there has to be some sort of way to acclimate to it, to integrate it. That's the word I'm looking for. To integrate what that means for them in their life.
Right.
We're not just all meant to go out and just spring out of our chairs and become activists and start shouting on the streets.
No, it's more subtle than that. It's more. I think of it a lot of times like the little will versus the big will. The big will has got the big picture, and you'll act within that big picture. Maybe not really understanding the big picture, but your actions within the guidance of that big will is not at odds with the bigger picture. Like, you could look at it like, from a Christian perspective, God has a plan for your life, Well, you may not know all the little details, and you may not be informed about those details, but you have the faith to understand that there is such a plan and that you can be in alignment with it. And you don't need to know all the niggling details. It's actually kind of impossible for humans to do that anyway. Yeah. So the expectation of having that kind of a overview is probably a little naive, maybe.
Right. Well said. Very well said. Marshall has said that, understanding comes after participation. You don't get the mission script and then choose if you're going to do it. It's like, you're kind of pushed off the highway of life. I think of this analogy, the highway of life, the 6-lane highway going between the major cities, right? And everyone's just on the highway going where the signage says to go. And some people are called off that highway. They need to go into the wilderness of experience and come in contact with something beyond the visual, the auditory, the sensorial. They need to find something deeper, more pervasive, and connect with others who are finding that too. And so, the process of waking up in our confused and conflicted world is not what we might think. You're right. I think it is subtle at first. It's a shift that you can't even quite name it for a while. You can't say this is the day when it changed, nor can you say this is what I'm supposed to do. That's the mind trying to read into the mystery. You're responding to the mystery, and it's a point-to-point journey, dot to dot, and you don't know what the picture is going to be when all these dots get connected.
Right.
And this is, what we call the Great Coordination, which is a coordination of people around the world in many different religions to get into position to serve this world in specific ways, in many specific ways. But for enough people to feel this within themselves, to acknowledge that this awakening is underway. I can't go back to sleep. I can't just re-up the lease on my car and buy a bigger house and get a jazzier job and call myself a success. No, That is not the story of my life. There's something else for me to do. And if enough people can have that moment of awakening, however it comes for them, and take the steps to knowledge, back into contact with the real compass and guide. The compass and guide is not a book of scripture, I don't believe. It's not a set of rules or a new dogma or even an altruistic, optimistic vision of the future. It is a step-by-step process that lives and is held by knowledge within us. If enough people can do that, I would say there's hope for the world. And there is hope for the world because there are millions of people who are lost, but the tension is building, the knowledge is building, and they are waiting for something to activate that.
Right.
And who knows what'll happen? I don't know what'll happen.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't either.
But what's amazing here, in the new message is that there's a community of many hundreds of people now who are gathering every day. We have this remarkable new worldwide community site that we've just launched with chat and forum and teachings and a school and all of this. And they're coming in contact with each other in 70 plus countries. They're translating the steps to knowledge and the new message into 22 languages.
So that's done through volunteers? The translation work is all through volunteers?
Yep. We have tremendous community of volunteers, of students who are sharing the new message with others in ways that feel right.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It is gaining momentum and presence in the world. And more people are finding this teaching every day and are beginning the steps to knowledge, and it is doing amazing things for their lives.
Yeah.
It's giving them a great relief from the burden of knowing but not knowing.
Right.
I mean, know something, but you can't put your finger on it.
Right.
You can't move with it. You're in the wrong place and you know it, but you don't know where the right place is. It's giving people movement, fresh air behind their back.
Right. Well, they can fall into that groove, and then all this other ancillary stuff in their life starts coming into alignment in support of that. And then you start to realize, like, oh, this just happened to me. I'm doing this full time. I quit my job. I don't have an income. I don't have health insurance. I don't have any of those supports from, the world anymore because this is my mission. And I'm going, well, how the hell am I going to do this? And these little things happen that enable me to continue. I'm not getting rich, my health isn't getting dramatically better or anything like that. But all the things that I absolutely need to keep doing this are falling into place. And I have all these little examples, and they are the little subtle things. It's not big dramatic stuff, but it's the stuff that enables me to keep doing the work. And I think a lot of people that are probably coming into your organization, they're finding that too. They're like, oh, okay, this is what I came here to do. Now that I'm doing it, all these other things are falling in line for me to enable me to do that. And you're scratching your head. Well, how's this happening?
Right, right.
Well, welcome home.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a real journey. It may not be what we think it will look like.
Right.
There will be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, both personally and as a world, for certain. So it's important to be cautious. We're dealing with a new frontier of human experience. We're dealing really with the beginning of the next chapter.
Yeah. Well, and telling the truth has never been safe in this world. Yeah. It's not. So if you're expecting safety around all this, that's a little bit naive. Yeah. And one thing that I say, people get tired of me hearing I say it, but no one gets out alive and no one dies. So those things are like both true and diametrically opposed to each other. It's the ultimate cognitive dissonance place, but it also gives you a hell of a lot of freedom, because if you're here, you might as well get to work, because the outcome's the same either way. You're going to go. Do you want to go having done your job, or do you want to go being a watcher? Yeah. So to me, that's very empowering. I say that to myself a lot. It's like the Yaqui way of knowledge or whatever. Death sitting on your shoulder. It's not going anywhere. It's waiting for you. You're going to be there. So get on with it. Let's get to work. Yeah. The one thing I wanted to ask you though is about the pacification program. Because I think that's where a lot of light workers and people that do have conscience, that's where they get waylaid into this pacification program, for lack of a better term.
This is a program to pacify and numb the sensitivities and really the capability of people to see the truth and respond to it, encouraging acquiescence, encouraging spiritual beliefs, of acceptance and tolerance in all ways, in all cases, really disabling people's natural caution so that these forces can be in the world and even have the support of these people who are associating the visitors with a spiritual presence or a saving grace or something like this.
Right.
And also, the pacification program is aimed at not only disrupting the airwaves of human thought and producing a kind of disturbing static in the mental environment, but also encouraging the kind of thinking that is aligned to their presence in the world, encouraging us to think certain things and in certain ways that embrace their presence in the world, actually call for them to be in the world. For example, there's a strong influence to lose faith in human leadership, to believe that human beings are inept, are corrupt, are incapable of leading, and that this earth should belong as much to an extraterrestrial force as to us, that we haven't even earned our right to be here. I mean, talk about a fatalistic and highly detrimental form of thinking that basically gives away the keys in people's minds.
Yeah.
And basically gives up hope in the power of humanity to cooperate and collaborate and compromise and be compassionate, which, by the way, is happening in the world. There are millions of people working on important issues, devoting their lives to serving this planet.
Right.
So to just say that we can't make it without extraterrestrial assistance is really to give up on those people.
Yeah.
It's really to sell out your participation in the human race.
Right.
And that is a form of thought that's being encouraged in the pacification program.
Yeah. And it comes in through many angles, through religion, you know, I need to be saved, the whole anthropogenic climate change narrative, which is very disempowering. And actually, a lot of that's not even true. A lot of the climate change stuff that we've seen right now is a direct result of alien action and not human failures in human stewardship. And that's some of the information that we've come up with through the channeling series I've been doing with Carl Mollison, which is another disempowering narrative that's repeated and repeated. You know, you're poor stewards of the planet. You're destroying the planet. It's human activity that's causing climate change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, there's huge portions of that aren't even true, but it's part of the manipulation, part of the pacification program to get people to feel that they're not capable of actually being good stewards. Yes. Because look at what humans are already doing to the earth. That's not to negate the fact that there is such a thing as pollution, but you know, some of these weather extremes we've done some inquiries on this and found out that they're alien generated phenomenons, especially with some of these hurricane activities or the recent fires in my area where I live. That was not a human endeavor. That was an alien endeavor. Yeah. So that's a hard pill for people to swallow, but that's part of the alien agenda. That's part of what's going on here.
Okay. Well, I will beg to differ on that one point. The new message in the Allies most definitely say that climate engineering and climate change are not part of the alien agenda and phenomenon. They are part of human activity that is being encouraged by the intervention. Actually, to say that climate change is being driven by an ET agenda is, I find, quite disempowering because, well, so much for using CFL bulbs and preserving gasoline. It doesn't matter. Someone else is generating this change.
No, they're not mutually exclusive. It's just you need to be aware of where humans stop and where aliens begin, and there is a line there that is discernible.
To a point. I don't get into a whole lot of speculation about, wow, that thing in the sky, that's the intervention, or that ad on TV, that's the intervention, because I actually don't feel a lot of that is discernible. And in the end, doesn't matter, because in the end, they're here. They're here for one reason. We are the native peoples, and the power to resist that presence and to secure our future is firmly in our hands. And so this is, again, I think there is a tendency to get into the phenomenon, to read into world events, to talk about world leaders. In the end, what are you going to do? Are you going to make contact with the spiritual presence within you, which is basically connected to the flow of life on this planet, to its evolutionary track?
Yeah.
Are you going to connect with that? Or are you going to stay up here wafting on the winds of the world, getting shoved left and right?
Right.
Are you going to help raise awareness that there is an intervention? and that we need only speak out for it to stop. And that's something we can talk about, which is really what is the action plan regarding the intervention.
Yeah, and who are you speaking to?
Right. And so for me, there's so many associations that could be made between powerful groups and the intervention and religions, name calling, all of this stuff. And really, unfortunately, some of that tendency towards conspiracy theory and association making definitely supports the intervention as well. Because what it does is it takes people of conscience who are out there in the world with real jobs and real involvement, and it sidelines them, and it makes them look and sound crazy, and they get into this kind of self-fulfilling process of associating with a conspiracy and then wanting to connect it with another thing and another thing and another, and you begin to build a web of connections, whether true or not or half true. They do not help you reach other people. They do not help you raise awareness about the intervention. And to me, this is one of the most concerning things: is who is speaking out against the intervention? Who?
And how?
Other than Marshall Vian Summers and David Jacobs and a couple other people, who is calling this for what it is and providing a clear picture that literally hundreds of millions of human beings from every religion who don't really have a whole lot of background in this can sit back, look at this and say, I think it's possible. Visitation is occurring. We are the natives of this world. We are divided. We are distracted. We are delusional in some way. And there is a presence here that is undermining us. We need to say no.
Right.
In essence, that's the message that a lot of people need to hear. And so few people are involving themselves in that simple message.
Right. But they are out there. There's very few. That's been my discovery. That was one of my joys in finding, your guys' work, was that it was in alignment in the stuff that we'd been learning since April, through the channeling series I'm doing with Carl Mollison. Some of the details aren't going to match up, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. The overall message is in alignment. Right. The overall message about the solution is in alignment. And yes, you can get lost in the details and become part of the argumentative faction of discovery of trying to describe the map, so to speak. Yeah. But but there's no like minds can disagree on some points, and that's okay. That's not the end of that's not the end, that's not the be all end all. So so the important thing is that the salient truths are recognized, and and the salient factors for the solution can be supported, across different platforms. So absolutely, there's another messenger out there that probably is worth noting, and that's Barbara Messiniak with the series of books that she wrote back in the 90s, and some of the channeling material that she's come out. She's been accused of being quite harsh, and maybe there's speculation about her departing from the original sources of her information and stuff. But actually, if you go back, if you listen to some of the material that she's coming forth with right now, it's in alignment with what Marshall's talking about, with what the channel material from Creator, the series that we're doing with Carl Mollison, and I suspect that we're going to find some more. They're coming on board now, just like you were saying. There's millions of people out there that are of conscience, and some of them are getting connected connected in alignment with the information that's coming forth from these various sources.
Well, reality is, no one owns reality. No, reality is independent of us. We either choose to align with it or we choose to be in disalignment with it. Right. And so we are all seeing different snapshots of this reality, this picture.
Right. We have the human filter to deal with.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we're and as the nations and religions and cultures of the world come into contact with the reality of contact and realize this is happening and it is not for our benefit, there will be many competing perspectives and positions on that. But in the end, and I can see that coming. And yet for me, the most important thing is, what is the essence of what is happening and what we must do?
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you, because you spent some time in the Middle East, and the pacification program is going to operate very differently in the West than it does in the Middle East. And did you have an opportunity to look at the culture, religion, and people's front burner issues and stuff, and how that pacification program works in those cultures? Is that Because it's got to be different, right? I mean,
there's a revelation that Marshall has received called Terrorism and the Intervention. And this has not been released yet, but will be sometime soon. And it presents a very clear and concerning picture about one aspect of the pacification program, which is basically radicalizing disenfranchised and abused peoples who have a history of being abused by Western powers. Because in the world today, Western powers are the nations with the most strength, the most economic clout. They are the ones who influence the world the most. And they are, and have been, the ones to resist the intervention heretofore. And that may be a shocker for people to know that the United States, not completely, because it's not just one body, it's multiple bodies, factions, and departments and so forth, but on the whole has resisted the intervention heretofore. And as a result, the intervention has radicalized certain people in certain parts of the world that the United States has done wrong to in its past episodes of colonialism and so forth, to try to pull this country and other Western countries into intractable conflicts in, less developed parts of the world, to invest billions of dollars, lives, and basically to it's basically a process of divide and conquer in essence, but it's basically to embroil the most powerful human governments in conflicts that weaken them and diffuse them, and also discourage their own populations from trusting in their leadership. American trust in leadership could be said to be at the lowest low of it ever has been.
Right.
And thus we are seeing what we are seeing in this country. And unfortunately, through the wars in several countries, at least I can think of, that discouragement in human authority has been accentuated. Debt has grown. And the ability of the Western countries to collaborate and unite around the truth about contact is probably weaker now than it has been. Mm-hmm. So, that's one aspect of the pacification program. Again, the pacification program will use anything as material.
Right.
If we believe that someone is channeling a message from an off-planet source and is full of love and light and is pulling us in and making us weaker and less energetic and less connected to world events, or we're no longer trusting in the mainstream media narrative, the intervention will use that. They may have created it in the first place or not, I can't say, but it's just important to know that as the native peoples, we have weaknesses on our border to space that we have never thought about. Mm-hmm. Our radio communications into space, our spiritual inclinations, our economic competition with each other, our tendency towards war, and our great investment in armament against each other, not even against those who might come from beyond. We have so many kind of chinks in the wall that can be undermined quietly and slowly. And, I'll give an example of this, and this has just been in my mind recently in the last month, thinking about, I actually went online and Googled, show me a map of all the tribes, Native American tribes of the North American continent pre-conquest, before the colonial powers came into being and really took control of the whole continent. And seeing this map of all these names, the Cherokee, the Sioux, the Chippewa, all of these different peoples, and, obviously in competition for hunting grounds, some of them collaborating, some not, a good deal of warfare probably between them. And here was coming to their shores another force. And the truth about that force was so simple. They are here to take what you have. That's it. And yet, for some tribes, they read into that visitation the need for, allowing others to have space on your own land, the need to share, or that this is a spiritual force from beyond the known boundary of the ocean. Right? They're different. They have things. They obviously have things we don't, like horses and weapons, and reading into that and competing with each other. Some collaborating, some not. The essential truth is that force is here to take what you have. Can you see and know that? Can these tribes unite around that simple truth or not? And when you look back on history with that is historical truth, by the way. That, yes, there were some missionaries to bring God and religion, but more or less, the bulk of that presence was here for one reason. And the inability of the natives to see that and to respond at a simple truth level really rings in the historical record for me. And I see it in our world today. I mean,
Yeah.
we can get into chemtrails and government conspiracies and all of this minutia, some of which could be real and some of which could be manufactured to keep us enamored with minutia. But can we respond to the simple truth? And that's my message to people, and that's Marshall's message to people, is that there is a simple truth about the ET presence in the world. It is not the truth we want, but it is reality, independent of what we want.
Right.
Will we respond to it, or will we create our own reality around this and respond to that?
Yeah, very well put. So what's in the works right now for you and all the people that are working with you? And
oh, well, a tremendous amount, actually. We're bringing forward a large body of education about life in the universe and contact. This last summer, we published a core book of the new message called The Greater Community, Contact with Intelligent Life in the Universe. We're about to publish the next book to follow that, which is Preparing for the Greater Community, which is a remarkable text received decades ago by Marshall, which details how the individual can prepare mentally, spiritually, physically for the threshold of contact. In addition, the Allies of Humanity have spoken through Marshall again in recent times, giving a fourth set of briefings, which is tremendous. I mean, it's, how many years was it? I think 2012, I want to say, or actually, no, 2008 was the third set of Allies briefings.
okay.
So 8 years later, the Allies of Humanity are still involved. They're still watching. They still have more to say.
Right.
And so that will be coming out in the future.
And there was there was an attempted contact episode that's documented in book 2 on page 56, I think. You
want to read that, or do you have that available to?
Well, I was curious about that because that was a pretty dramatic episode in this whole story. One that really got our attention when we looked at it. It's like, oh my gosh,
Tell me again.
He was actually there was a physical contact that was arranged, and they actually had to, for lack of a better term, eliminate themselves and their craft in order to protect your father and themselves. Well, they didn't protect themselves in this case; they protected your father. As far as that's my understanding of it.
What that's referring to is an amazing part of the story of this work.
Yeah, it is.
Which at some point will have to be a book and a documentary, because it's an amazing story what Marshall and Patricia and the small group of people with him at his side all these decades have gone through. And what that page in Allies 2 is referring to is the first Allies mission, which arrived in 1984-85 and attempted to give Marshall something, okay? A communication, a perspective, a gift. And at that point, my family was called out of our living situation, our jobs in the Bay Area. I was 6 weeks old, basically. I was a baby, newborn. And we went on this journey to prepare to receive what the first Allies mission had brought.
Where in the Bay Area, can I ask?
I'm not quite sure where we were living at that point. Somewhere,
I was in Vallejo. In 1984, I was in Vallejo in college.
Okay. We lived in San Francisco in and around that time.
Okay.
But, we went on this mysterious journey, and the Allies mission got into proximity of Marshall. They got close, and yet the intervention discovered their presence and tracked them, and the Allies mission had to terminate themselves with their gift largely ungiven, but not wholly ungiven, because they transferred to Marshall a story called the Aranon Epic, which is a story that he's been writing ever since. And that is another book, a demonstration of what the way of knowledge, steps to knowledge, look like beyond our world, and how this great coordination moves not just individuals in our world, but individuals in other worlds and even whole worlds to take a certain course of action, to unite in certain ways. And it's an amazing demonstration, really, of the work of God in the universe. And I'm excited about this, and Marshall is too. And this is another book that's forthcoming. But It's an amazingly moving truth that the first Allies mission came all this way to reach us and had to terminate themselves in service to a race they had never interacted with, a young and emerging world just out there that had the potential to maintain its spiritual awareness and its freedom so that it could give its gifts into a greater universe of life. That a group of free worlds or individuals in those worlds saw that potential in us and sent their emissaries really to reach us, and that they lost their lives in the process of doing that is tremendously moving.
It is. It's amazing. I have good feelings about the future for what you're doing.
Yeah,
I do.
Well, yeah. Every person who can respond and take the steps to knowledge and meet those others who are as well, that's adding a person with unique gifts and energy and insight to the mix.
Right.
Yeah. So let's keep the essential truth of this in view and become advocates for the essence of what all other people need to know, because not everyone will agree with the terms we use or the certain position we take, but everyone needs to know the truth about contact, the truth about our emergence into a greater community of life. And I feel everyone who can needs to receive this new message from God and see what it says to them.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Sometimes it just takes, it's like planting a seed, you put the information out there and the initial reaction may be one of, they're repulsed by it, but it sits there and it germinates, and
well, what some people say is that this is very fearful, this is very fearful, and I don't want fear in my life. And I think it's really important to know what makes you have a fearful response is not necessarily fear-driven. Because if you do that, you will seek selectively only the beautiful things of life that encourage a warm feeling, and you will deny everything that doesn't. This is reality. Reality can be scary, especially if you're unprepared for it. Mm-hmm. So it is not a bright picture immediately regarding the intervention, but there is a tremendous possibility for our race. We have a spiritual gift to offer even beyond our race. This is part of the big picture about where we're going as a world. But the next 100 years or so, we're going to have a tremendous journey down the valley wall to the river. We're going to have to cross that river, and we're going to have to climb the other side to get to the next plateau for this race. And so I do want people kind of geared up and sober. Yeah. We can't be inebriated with our own desires and fantasies as we move into this. We have to be clear, sober people, deal with reality, participate in reality, and make our contribution for the future of this race.
One of the ways I looked at it, and it's like Denny, how can you be so cheerful about all this? And I go, well, if you have a problem and it's a really serious problem, but you can't figure out what the hell it is, look at the relief that you have once you figure out what the problem is. Because now that you know what the problem is, you can start really be intelligently figuring out what the solution is. And that's what humans have been doing for thousands of years. So we're, like you say, we're perfectly capable of figuring this out and doing something about it, but we have to know where we are first. We have to reveal it, and then we can forgive it, or however you want to, apply the solution, But if you're still muddling around like, oh gosh, something's wrong, but I don't know what it is. Well, Marshall's telling us, by virtue of his contacts, what the problem is. Yeah. So, and that's like 50% of the solution right there.
And I know Marshall invites all those who know about the reality of contact to consider if it's finally time to acknowledge that we know, in essence, what is happening. Enough to know what to do.
Yeah.
Can we put to rest the phenomenon to a certain degree and not generate even more and more static noise so that we can't even discern the signal? The signal is so clear, so true. It was true for the Native Americans of this continent 200 years ago. It's true for us as the natives of this world right now.
Right.
That there's an intervention in our world, and we must respond to it as the native peoples. And I call for more advocates of that basic truth. And the more we get into names and dates and details, the more we will start to disagree with each other.
Yeah.
And your information, my information, and so forth. And I can't stress enough, this is a clear picture. And for all those who know about this phenomenon, it is time to go beyond the phenomenon. It is time to see it for what it is and respond for what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess for those who really need the details and stuff like that, well, you've got thousands of pages of material on the 2 websites you mentioned.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a good place to satisfy your urge for more detail.
Oh.
And anything else in alignment, like we've noted here, like I say, I think the channeling series I've done with Carl is very, very helpful. It kind of fleshes out some other aspects or another way of looking at the same basic message. And it's like, you go ahead and take the what does the COP use? Means, motive, and opportunity, right? That's what, if you're investigating a crime or something like that, those are the tools that you take with you, and go ahead and use those tools in your rabbit hole and flesh out the map however it suits you, until you get to the place where you can go, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the essential truth about it is not different because, again, this is objective. We are trying to be objective, and objectivity should lead us to some of the same conclusions.
Yes.
And I think what really is tremendously helpful in this, for folks who feel overwhelmed or dismayed or discouraged or even depressed, and I've called it astro depression, which is that the universe is not what you wanted it to be. It's nature. Sorry. It's not a spiritual universe of fairies and enlightened beings and scientists whizzing around, giving gifts to one another. It's an expression of nature, just like the world we live in. What's really helpful for that is to see the bigger picture of what Marshall calls the greater community. We live in a greater community of worlds. Our world was always destined to emerge out of its isolation into some degree of contact with this greater community. We must prepare for that. The preparation has been given, and there's a community of people around the world who are undergoing that preparation and are beginning to generate the kind of forethought and insight and vision that this race needs to enter this new environment of life.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that I found you guys. I think I speak for a lot of other people out there who have been, snooping around looking for something that rings true and makes sense and doesn't leave any dangling, unexplained aspects, which is a problem with a lot of of this. Once you arrive at some kind of narrative and you go, well, what about this? And there's not really an explanation for it there.
Right.
So I don't find that to be the case here.
Yeah, these are, you and I and others are big picture people, and we don't just need tantalizing, details about a phenomenon. We need the whole picture. Because if we're going to respond with our lives and actually move in life in response to this, we need the whole thing. We don't just need bits and pieces and we're going to piece it all together.
Yeah.
And the new message from God is basically a confirmation of that need, that we don't have what we need to respond to this situation. We needed something from beyond the world.
Right.
And it's come in tremendous form, talking about nearly every aspect of our lives, from the mundane to the mystical. And it's a new reality, really. I mean, it's the new message from God is bringing a whole new reality of awareness and understanding that will help us begin to prepare. It's really the new reality of the future being given now. It's an it's a preparatory path for the reality to come.
Right. It's like going to school before you go get the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And so this race needs enough people to undergo that preparation for that new reality ahead of time.
Yes.
Otherwise, we are not going to make this transition into the greater community.
Yeah. Well, I want to commend you for going public like you have on behalf of your father's work. And I want to commend your father for his extraordinary patience, because it's like you get this information and you think the world's going to run to your doorstep and go, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And when that doesn't happen, it can be a little discouraging. 30 years is a long time. And so your father's a very patient and evidently a very spiritual man and deserves some credit for what he's gone through.
He does. I agree. And I having been his son and seen more or less the whole journey, it's blown me away. The compassion of this man, the groundedness, the realism, the dedication to this world, into bringing forth this understanding that was ahead of its time, basically, but will become acknowledged by the whole world eventually.
Eventually, yes.
I encourage your viewers to go, put Marshall Vian Summers into the search bar at YouTube and just watch what he has to give.
Yeah.
And hear this and receive it from him himself. And, see what that awakens for you. Because he's really calling for you to return to who you really are and to reclaim the strength and the gifts and the natural talents that really you brought into the world.
Right. Which is the solution to the problem that we're talking about. If there's a big dark problem here that's being presented, there is a big, bright, and powerful solution also being offered. So this isn't a dead end. This isn't a blind alley. Yeah. It's not a closed off canyon.
No, a box canyon, exactly.
Right.
I mean, if you can see the picture for what it is, then you can acknowledge the solution. But if you don't want to face the reality of what this is and you prefer a brighter, more, spiritual vision of reality, then you probably won't be able to embrace the kind of solution that's been given and the pathway of steps that's been given.
Right.
So I think understanding, like you're saying, Denny, which is, can we see reality and what's really going on clearly for what it is so that we know where we are and we can take the solution, find the solution, receive it, and apply it.
Right. Can be done.
Beautiful way of describing it, and it can be done.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful. And I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Good. All right. Well, we'll keep you in our thoughts, and I'm sure we'll meet again down the road.
Yes. And thanks for everybody for joining us, and we'll be back. Bye-bye.